Today we're looking at operationalizing ethics within a company called Hugging Face, and I'm going to take you through some of the lessons that I've learned, some of the lessons that we've learned as an org, and I'll give you a couple recommendations for things that I think are important to think about if you want to incorporate people like me into your org. So, bam, a little bit of an overview. I like structure. So we're going to start off with who I am. I like situating things. So you'll get to see a little bit of what my perspective kind of comes from. We'll talk about Hugging Face. If you're not familiar with it, I'll give you an overview of that. We'll talk about what machine learning is as well, just because I really like laying down a little bit of like language and kind of fixing some posts. And then we'll look at what ethics means for us, what our company looks like from both like hiring and projects. And we'll take those lessons and extend them forward into things that we're working on and things that I think are personally important to talk about, both within industry and media. Okay, bam. So this is me, Nima Boscarino. My background is in computer science and education at a place called Simon Fraser University. So I'm over in Vancouver, Canada. I've taken a little bit of a kind of route. So if I was to define myself, it'd be no longer a web developer, but used to be. Mostly not really an educator anymore, but used to be. Not really machine learning engineer, but used to be. Lots of used to be's. And most recently, I did dev advocacy, and then this like AI ethics engineer role that I like made up. Like no one knows that, but I made it up. And pretty soon I'll be going down to San Diego for a PhD. Okay, so teaching AI ethics. Just to get the juices kind of flowing. When we think about AI, a lot of the time now people are thinking about things like DALL-E, right? So we talked about generative AI. This thing makes pictures. Woo. ChatGPT also happens to be by the same company. OpenAI, you've all played with it. But I want to point out maybe like other uses. So this thing here is called AlphaFold. DeepMind is the org that worked on this, and this is AI for predicting protein structures and whatever, like science. There's like user-facing AI, and then there's sort of like more background AI. I'll be totally honest, that's what I'm a lot more excited about. This is making a lot of money right now. Okay, so if I was to define AI in a way that makes sense to me, it would be those like smart, kind of useful systems. There's a focus on things that like people can do, and then we replicate that kind of behavior with technology. AI is not a very like prescriptive kind of term. When we're talking about AI in my kind of sphere, we're not really talking about how you do it, but more kind of like the end result is that like illusion of like human-like behavior. So there's lots of different ways of doing AI. However, the one that is particularly interesting right now to a lot of people is this like data-focused one. And when we use data to do any kind of like artificial intelligence, we're going to call it machine learning. Machine learning, as you've seen, and as you probably know from your backgrounds, is kind of like all over the place. I think it's really important to draw these distinctions for people, especially among like friends and family members and lay people. The data part feeds into machine learning, and you can use it across all these kinds of different domains and whatever. I've been encouraging people to think about the distinctions here, because when you start getting into ethics issues, I think it's really, really, really important to have like solid language and solid grounding for what we're working on. Because as we can chat about in the workshop that I'll be doing later, there's very big differences in the ways that people are talking about like AI ethics and safety are. Okay, we'll hit these last couple points here, which is there's different kinds of machine learning. There's different kinds of things that you can do with them, and people are getting really stoked about using the same tool to hit a bunch of these different points. Kind of high level, the ones that like Hugging Face is really well known for right now are natural language processing. So this is what we really kind of started off with. Language models, your chat GPTs. However, we've also branched into computer vision and audio stuff. The computer vision bit is quite a bit more interesting than audio for a lot of people, just because you get nice little visual outputs. But we're all kind of familiar with things like DALL-E, and now GPT-4 technically is supposed to have vision capabilities. It's just not like public facing yet. So I am really interested in seeing what that like vision bit is going to look like there. Okay, so we've done a little bit of a kind of journey through what AI and machine learning is for me and for us at Hugging Face, but I haven't really talked about what Hugging Face is. Very, very, very broadly, Hugging Face is the like open source machine learning ecosystem and community. What we're trying to do is set up tooling that allows people to do all kinds of machine learning stuff just like on their own. Set up communities, set up little like hacker circles, and it's really, really, really taking off. Concretely, what we have is a website where people post models, and that might be something that if you're not familiar with already, you might become familiar with in the next little while, is people are training their own models or training models in groups and then posting them up on the website for other people to work off of. Of course, to train models, you need data, so we also have a data hub, data sets. And then people post demos. They post like, oh, I did this with machine learning, with AI, and you can play around with it. That's our hub portion. But we also have kind of like a SaaS kind of bit, your old software as a service. If you want to train models on our hub, bam. And then this last right there, the open source libraries has kind of been like the secret sauce, which is feeding how people are actually doing open source machine learning. We're trying to stay on top of the wave and releasing libraries that make different kinds of AI development easier and easier and easier to lower that bar. Okay, so summed up, our ecosystem looks like hub, science, and then open source. The hub bit is where the community is working on machine learning stuff, and that's where they end up throwing stuff into. And they're having a great time. You know, things are going viral. We kind of keep a very hands-off approach into like telling people how to use it. We've let people kind of decide what they want to do there. And so you're seeing people from digital humanities, you're seeing people from the various sciences and music and art forming their own little communities on here. However, by keeping an eye on what people are doing on the hub, that informs our science, because we do have research teams that try to build new models and try to come up with new strategies for training or for data set curation and things like that. So that is the science bit. And we do all kinds of like collaborations. One of the more kind of like public ones was Big Science last year, where we trained a massive open source model called Bloom. And all of that, so both the community on the hub, science, all of that feeds into our open source, where we look at what's going on and what the trends are, and we develop new tools. And I've just listed out a bunch of tools on there. With the tools, then people take that stuff and go back into the hub. So say we released a library called diffusers last year, which is used to create diffusion models. The most popular diffusion model might be something like stable diffusion or DALL-E. No, yes. They're generating things most often images. And once we released that, all of a sudden we saw a boom in diffusion models being released onto Hugging Face. Okay, so given all of this, like that's what our focus is on a company level, like all the products and all the stuff that we release is that. But as the previous keynote pointed out, there's issues. There's a lot of issues over in the AI world we're starting to have to contend with. They've been around for a long time. People have been really kind of like ringing the bell for a while, but only now are people starting to like listen. So some of them, among a litany of them, is bias, copyright, privacy. People tend to get angry when you spy on them. Who knew? Oh no. Oh shoot, did you fire me for whatever random reason? Well, I'm a little upset about that. Maybe that's bias. Or copyright. This is something I'm sure everybody here feels very personally about. So in order to address these things, we have an ethics group. Yeah, we have an ethics group at Hugging Face. This isn't a team. This isn't a group of people that stay siloed. These are people from all over the company that get together and update each other on the projects that are going on. Hugging Face is a very, very flat structure. People kind of choose what they want to work on. And so it is important for us to keep each other up to date. And high level, we're going to be touching things like the community, right? Like, do we need new tooling to let the community moderate themselves? Do we need to deal with adding new features for safety or for exploring a new kind of thing in terms of analyzing fairness and bias? Or one of the things that we're looking at now is like measuring data sets to see what's actually in them. So that's our ethics group. We convene once a week, we chat, and then we break off and we work on our stuff. Oh, hunky dory. It's so easy, so much fun, beautiful. Not quite. Addressing ethics issues is like really, really, really difficult within organizations. People are getting laid off all the time. Hugging Face is particularly lucky because we have like a very, very tight group of interdisciplinary people who support each other quite a bit, and we have buy-in from leadership on the fact that this is important. But if I was to highlight some of the classic issues that you run into when you're trying to like operationalize ethics, it's going to fall into definitions. And all of this, by the way, I'm going to move over here. I've stolen from Metcalf and Boyd. There's an article called Owning Ethics that I really recommend everyone reads. I've boiled it down to definitions where like we have to come to an agreement on what ethics even means within an org, and that's like hard. Even once you agree, what it's supposed to be, it's not easy. You need processes for it so that stuff doesn't fall through, and you need to justify the cost, because a lot of time ethics is going to be like, yo, can you stop doing that? And a company does not want to do that unless it's like a legal requirement. So it's nice for the ethics people to be like really good friends with the legal counsel of the company. And then last of all, here, but huge blocker within orgs is like the norms that you're fighting. It's important to remember that like in our case, we're within the like tech world, and the tech world has mindsets that they're very like used to. I've summed them up here. Some of them, meritocracy, like tech people think that you're there because you deserve to be there. Ethics people are like, oh, maybe not. Maybe more complicated. Technological solutionism. Ethics person shows up and goes, hey, we got this issue. And a tech person's gonna go like, awesome, let me roll up my sleeves, let me get some Mountain Dew, like we'll code up a solution for you. And it's like, maybe the tech is the problem. And then the last one I put here is market fundamentalism, where we're talking about like, at the end of the day, the market wins, like the money wins. If the ethics of it is showing that like you shouldn't have a feature because it's like ethically kind of gross, if the market wants it, then the company doesn't really have an incentive to go ahead with that. So these are things that by our org structure and by having like people who are really strong champions, to say like Hugging Face, we have people like Meg Mitchell, who is like a very, very strong champion for what ethics means. And by partnering with like our press people, we've crafted a narrative externally that we are accountable for internally, right? If we say that we're going to be ethical, then we have to be ethical on the inside. And I'm going to show you, as we're kind of wrapping up, what that means in terms of us like doing things. I've broken it down to product research and then our external stuff. External would be like press and things like that. Product, and then research is going to be both on the computational side and more on like the social sciences side. Perfect. So here is an example of like a product intervention, like an engineering intervention into doing something that is like ethical within our existing platform. I talked about our hub. That's where the data sets get stored or the models get stored by the community. The data set hub features data that, surprise, surprise, has been scraped without consent and stolen. Stolen, that is the word for it. So I'm going to focus quite a bit on consent in the workshop. So if this is interesting to you, come join me. But something that we worked on recently was we collaborated with an organization called Spawning, which is representing artists that don't want their art stolen. They put together an API and we integrated it in here. tiny bit of opted in data in this particular data set. Point of it being that now we have like a little window on the hub that shows you the data that you're looking at. How bad is it? Here's another thing, disaggregators. It's just another little tool built to push forward the norm of doing like research where you're disaggregating data sets by like intersecting identities. We're not going to dig into this, but I just want to say like, here's another example of like an engineering tool or a product that pushes forward that like ethics value. And then the last one here is this thing on like language model leaderboards. There's research as well. So this is one that caught quite a bit of wind a little while ago, which is that stable diffusion, a little biased. So we did some research, we published a paper, published a preprint. We're about to publish, I guess, on the bias that you find in stable diffusion. Here's one on counting carbon and how green or not green particular models are. And I'm gonna wrap this up with our like external efforts. This is more like what are we doing to set things for the community. So we have an ethicist internally that works on charters that then are the mandate for how our open source projects get built. And that's something that we like lock in, and then our engineers who work on open source have to abide by these charters. Or model cards, we're trying to set a norm for people to like document what a model can and can't do. Okay, so in the last minute, we'll talk about some of the lessons that we took from this post hoc, like after ethics work. Oh, and I kind of exist, if you're wondering about my role, I exist anywhere on these things as an engineer. That's what an ethics engineer is. But I took all the work that we've done and all the work that the community is doing, and I summed it up in a way that is not academically rigorous, but it's something that I think people can digest easily. Like I've shown this to teens and they get it. Did you do the work properly? That's rigorous. If you see somebody just kind of like lying, fudging the numbers a little bit, they're not being rigorous. And that's like an easy to place ethical issue. Consent, self-explanatory, socially conscious. This one's a bit weirder. It's, are you dealing with stuff that needs a subject matter expert? A domain outside of tech? Maybe go talk to them. Sustainable, inclusive, and last is inquisitive, or I like the word critical more, where like, did you ask hard questions about assumptions that you're making when you're building this tech? You can use these categories. I recommend you take them. You can find them over at hf.co/ethics. But I put a little pipeline of what you can do with them. First of all, maybe assess. So if you're media people, I would love for you to take these categories and start using that language to assess whether particular things, particular AI things, are they rigorous? Are they consentful? Like use those words. People will get it, but we need to see more of those words being used. If you've narrowed down issues within a thing, find ways to assess those, but I like being able to split those into kind of nicely distributed issues. And then last is like sometimes you can't address these things, especially internally. Maybe there just isn't a solution yet, in which case make it really clear it's not consentful, just slap it on. Or is somebody using AI for something that feels kind of pseudoscience-y? Put a little crystal sticker on it. Here's one for where clearly people did not listen to the subject matter experts, and lo and behold, it didn't end up the way that they expected it. So that brings me to the end here. My name is Nima Boscarino. Thank you so much, and I'm looking forward to meeting you all later.